Hello guys, how are you? Welcome to another training. This particular training is all based around the zones of personal growth and eliminating this one right here, the fear barrier. Because so many of us are getting caught up with this fear barrier all the time. And when we are getting caught up with this particular fear barrier, it's hindering our lives. And in these 5 slides of growth that will determine the quality of your life, I will show you how to eliminate that fear barrier. But in order to eliminate this fear barrier, we must understand a few things. One of the things that we must understand here is very, very simple. There are different zones of your personal growth. And unless you understand what zone you are in, the fear barrier may or may not be getting in your way. So enjoy this training. It is here for you. I want you to really be able to dissect and understand this, because if you have an understanding of this, you know exactly what you need to do to be moving forwards. Obviously, I'm going to be here with you. I might just be moving myself around the screen at different stages to be able to show you certain things on the screen. But this is ultimately what we're going to be talking about here. Okay? The fear barrier. Because very, very simply, there are 4 zones of your personal growth where you need to understand where are you. So if you're looking at this already, let me ask you, which zone are you currently in? And give me an answer. Tell me the answer of the zone that you think that you are currently in. What do you think it is? I'm going to give you a hint here. People can tend to overshoot where they are. Because in the area of your emotions, which is specifically what I am detailed and passionate about helping you in, people generally overshoot where they are. Because you see, you have the familiarity zone. This is also known as the comfort zone, by the way. This is you down here, by the way. Thought I'd draw a picture of you. This is you down here. The familiarity zone, which is the comfort zone. You then have the learning zone when you start to branch out a little bit and gain new understandings. Then you can see we're hit with the fear barrier. But then you have the growth zone, when you're growing and you're expanding who you are. And then you finally have the expansion zone, which is when you obliterate anything that stood before it. So I'll ask you again, before we begin here, which zone do you feel like you're in? And when you answer that, why are you not in a zone higher than that? Unless you're in the expansion zone already, of course. Let's get to work, shall we? Because this is how you eliminate the fear barrier. Because what we need to understand is firstly this. These are the pros and cons of each zone. The familiarity zone, down here. Why do we like it? Well, because it's very, as you can see down here without my things getting in the way, it's very close to us down here with my cursor. It's very close. You know, it's comfortable, it's safe, and it's basic. That's the pro of it, you know. Why do we do the same job day after day after day? Why do we come back to the same relationship day after day after day? Why do we take the same route to work day after day after day? Why do we eat the same foods day after day after day? Why do we do these things? Because they're comfortable, they're safe, they're basic. Wonderful. And see, I'm taking this approach with it because we all need some familiarity in our life. We absolutely do. When it comes to your personal growth, though, and the fear barrier specifically, you're miles away from breaking through it. Miles away. Because the truth is, this type of life is boring. It's unfulfilling. It's life limiting. Let me ask you, if when it comes to your job, you are going back to the same people, the same type of work, the same job, the same environment, the same conversations, the same emotions, how excited do you feel about that job? The same as your relationship, the same as your physical hobbies. This zone is good only for a small period of time. We all need some comfort, some safety, and some basic needs met. That's why we like being in the familiar zone, in the comfort zone. But for too long, this is what happens. Why is this an issue? Because, and you're going to see me say this later on in this training, because anyone who finds themselves struggling with certain emotions, what they desperately want to do is break through the fear barrier. But I don't want to get too uncomfortable. I don't want to be too unfamiliar. I want to stay in my comfort zone all the time. It's a yin and yang type of approach that's going on here. It's a push and pull that's conflicting with each other, hence why we don't make progress. But then you see, then there's some people who go, you know what? I want to step out of my familiarity zone, my comfort zone. I want to start to learn. And this is where things become enjoyable, motivating, and stimulating. And they do. You know, when you start to learn certain things in your life, whether that's learn about someone else, learn about a relationship that you're in, learn about a new job, for a short period of time, it's enjoyable, it's motivating, it's stimulating. But again, what happens? It's dated. We want more. You know what I mean by that as well. When you start to learn ways to cope and manage with your anxiety and fears and worries, initially, oh, good, but then it's not quite cutting it for me, right? Exactly. Because you see, what we ultimately want is to break through that fear barrier. And when we learn, we don't always break through the fear barrier. When we do that, and I'm going to show you how to do that, when we do that, this is where life becomes mentally freeing, emotionally enhancing, purposeful in our life. Because then we start to grow in our lives. We start to grow in our lives to be able to expand and grow and become more and give more and share more and do more in our lives when we break through that fear barrier. The issue, sometimes that can get some judgment from people. I know it did in my life. Matt, why are you doing that? Matt, isn't that a bit extreme? Oh, Matt, I don't think you should. Oh, Matt, you know, I've done some wonderful things in my life up until this stage. I'm not special in that way. We all have done wonderful things. But, you know, every single time when I've chose to grow, whether that was become a professional footballer, whether that was to start a business, excuse me, whether that was to start running ultra marathons, whether that was to, you know, change my business and go from where I was with the speaking into helping people overcome this thing, I'm growing. It's mentally free and it's enhancing, but it gets judgment. Okay, cool. I'm just giving you the pros and cons. I'm not here to tell you where you should or shouldn't live. I'm here to show you how to eliminate the fear barrier and live a life that is purposeful and fulfilling. What you do with that is up to you. Because then finally you hit the expansion zone, which is where emotional freedom comes in. Spiritually developing, passion activating, deeply fulfilling. The issue is you're over here in the bottom left-hand corner, and the expansion zone is all the way over here. You can see my cursor. So for a short period of time, there can be some short-term uncertainty. And you and I both know that when it comes to anxiety and fear and worry and doubt and dread and depression and overwhelm and anxiety, OCD, you name it, we don't need any more uncertainty. We don't need any more uncertainty. So the expansion zone, not many people go there. I'll level with you from the start. Not many people go there. That's why not many people overcome their fears. Look at the world. Look at the world. Turn on your TV. Look at the news. Go read a newspaper if people still do that. Whatever you do, have a look. Is it expansion and growth focused or is it fear focused? You and I both know it's the latter. That's why most people live in this place. This is why we do what we do. That's why we all try to control everything in our lives all the time, because we just want to be familiar, because the world is ever changing. The life is ever changing all the time. What we need to understand, if we were going to personally grow, this is what this is about, personal growth. We need to understand the pros and cons, because I'll always be honest and open with you, but what we need to do to eliminate this fear barrier in our lives. Okay? Because you see, once you know the pros and cons, let me move this along. How do you access each zone? How do you do that? Well, very simple. The familiarity zone, do Nothing. You don't need to do anything to access that part of you. The familiarity zone is where you just are. It's just you. It's familiar. We're all wrestling to try and stay in the familiarity zone. And it's like, cool, stay caged, because I'm going to get to this, but all you have to do is sit at home, no energy, no focus or direction. I don't need to tell you what the issue is with that. I think you already know. To access the learning zone, we create a focus of intention. Learn a language, an instrument, a new skill, a new possibility. I have podcasts, I have YouTube trainings, I have personal exclusive trainings, I do one-to-ones, I do group programs, I run workshops, I do live events, I do talks, I do all sorts of things. People are learning from me all the time. The issue, depending on if they're coming to grow or coming to learn, will be a very big difference, because the growth sits the other side. And hear me on this, stay with me here. The growth sits the other side of the fear barrier, because not only are they creating a focus and intention to learn these things, for example, with me here, like what you are doing right now, by the way, but then they decide, commit, and act to a higher part of me. The difference between learning and growing lies in the action you take. Write that down. The difference between learning and growing lies in the action that you take, because that's where you learn that thing and then you apply for that job, or you quit that job, or you sign up for that event, or you start that relationship, you end that relationship. You decide, commit, and act to a higher part of you. Where people find friction with this is, as you see in the bottom left here, there's a fear barrier that gets in the way. That's why I have thousands upon thousands of people who consume my content, all looking to learn. To your credit for being here, you're not in the familiar zone by listening to me right now or watching me here. You're in the learning zone. Great. There's a reason why on my podcasts, though, I always say, don't let this be a nice listening for you. Go and action it in your life. And if some of you here listening to this, you've heard that from me. Why? Because that's where you grow. That's where you develop. That's where you, if you remember the last slide here, become more mentally free and emotionally enhancing. That's this part. But then you see there's one final zone, my favourite zone, if I'm honest with you. And that is where you cut off from all other eventualities. You create a state that fuels your true self, and you follow at the level of your heart, not the feeble, fickle thoughts and feelings of your head. This is where you deal with the underlying issue. You face the fear that you've told yourself for the last day, week, month, year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. You decide, commit, and act to something beyond the realm of your current possibility. I'll give you a great example of this in my life. Probably, how long was it ago now? Maybe 6 years ago now. So maybe 7 years ago. My professional football career was pretty much coming towards an end. And I knew for me, I didn't know this at the time, this is something I've developed since, but I knew for me that I needed to grow in my life. It was something that fueled me from day one, growing and expanding and learning. It was something that just fueled me. And so I remember, I can't remember if it was in January, I can't remember of what year, I read this book. And this book was completely, hear me on this, unfamiliar to me. Unfamiliar. It was about something called ultra marathons. I don't know if you've heard of those. Ultra marathons. Now, I didn't know really anything about running. I'd always obviously was a fit guy because I played professional football, but I didn't know anything about running. I thought the longest people ran was a marathon. And I thought them people are a bit loopy anyway. And so I read this book that was completely unfamiliar to me. And I learned so much in a short period of time because I had a certain focus of an intention here that it absolutely blew my mind what these ultra marathons were. And what ultra marathons are, pretty simply, is anything that is over a marathon. So 30 miles. So a marathon is 26 miles, 26.2 to be precise. It's 30 miles, 50 miles, 80 mile, 100 plus mile races. And I was like, imagine that. And you see, I read this book and I learned a lot from this book just from understanding it. And I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Now, to put this into context, the furthest I'd ever ran was 10 kilometers, like 6 miles, I beg your pardon. And I was like, I'm going to run an ultra marathon. I'd never even become close to running a half marathon, let alone a marathon. And I was talking about running an ultra. And you see, in January of this particular year, I set myself a goal that in that June, so I gave myself 4 months. So it was February time, I beg your pardon. I said January was when I started reading the book, finished it in February time. I set my goal that within 4 months, I was going to train to get ready to run an ultra marathon that was 52.8 miles, if I remember correctly, 85 kilometers. Now, when we talk about this, the fear was rife. Could I do it? Was I going to be able to? Oh my God, this and that. The judgment externally from people, because I was choosing to commit to that higher part of me, rife. My closest family members, not because they didn't support me, but because they was like, what on earth? Where has this come from? What is this about? But you see, I didn't just choose to grow and commit to that and sign up for it, but I cut off from all other eventualities. If you scroll back through my Instagram, you'll see when I signed up for it, because it was, I put an Instagram post out there. I found this state within me. Obviously, I knew everything that I was doing now and things like this. And my business at the time was very much in its real toddler years. And I put myself in a state. I knew it was true. I knew it was right. I looked at this thing. I didn't know if I was going to be able to complete it, but I cut off from all other eventualities. And for those 4 months, I went into it. I just expanded who I was. I was completely ripped open who Matt Young was, killed the old identity of how I saw myself. And I had to create this guy that within 4 months went from pretty much finding running boring to someone who could run ultra marathons. Well, some of you know the story. Fast forward 5 years from that date, I ran 18 marathons and 17 ultra marathons, 5 of which were 100 mile plus. My longest run was 110 miles. The longest time it took me was 40 hours, just over 40 hours of non-stop running. Non-stop running. 40 hours. I've done it in the Alps, Mont Blanc, start in France, run into Italy, run into Switzerland, back into France. 107 miles that particular race was. Over 30,000 feet of elevation. Why am I telling you this? Because if I was in my familiar zone, or I just learned that particular book, and that was great, that's understand, I would never have penetrated the fear barrier to grow, or my favorite, expand and absolutely obliterate what stood before me. I absolutely would never have been able to do that. You see, the difference between learning and growing is the action that we take. The difference between growing and expanding is cutting off from other eventualities. My favourite saying of all time is burn the boats to take the island. And this is what it's about. That's how you access these zones. When I work with people and I'm working with their emotions, yes, they learn. We don't want to be familiar doing at home, doing nothing. They've done enough of that, by the way. Yes, we learn. 100% we grow. The people who really, really get the beautiful results that you see and you read about and you hear and you watch on my page, they expand. They step into an identity beyond what they previously deemed possible. They make the impossible possible. This is what I'm going to show you how to do. Right? Because you see, here's the pitfalls. Let's keep this moving. The pitfalls. The problem with each. Well, you know the problem with the familiarity zone. Limiting beliefs, emotionally caging, anxiety, fear, worry, doubt, dread, overwhelm, depression. That's because you live in the familiarity zone, if that's you who I'm talking to right now. We want to, I know you consciously and intellectually want to – move past that fear barrier, but thinking is never enough. What was the growth zone? The first step here, deciding, committing, and acting that allows it to happen. The problem with learning at times, and here's a key one that people don't really get, is they learn. You learn coping mechanisms, you learn management techniques, you learn grounding techniques, but you end up mentally kidding yourself. I tried CBT. It's not my fault that the medication didn't work. I can't because I've got XYZ coming up in my life, and we kid ourselves. We tell ourselves we've tried because I've tried to learn. I did try to learn, and that isn't a problem, by the way. But we end up kidding ourselves as to what's possible. But really, what we're doing is we're getting close to that fear barrier and it never penetrates it. Coping mechanisms and grounding techniques and management techniques for that matter, what are they? They're about trying to manage the fear. Yeah, not penetrate it. Look at where my arrow is. Not move past it, where this arrow's going here. No, just learn to manage this fear. This fear, when I'm in the learning zone, is still on top of me. Look at me in the top right here. It's still on top of me because the fear barrier is there. So I'm going to learn to manage and cope. But we mentally kid ourselves in that place. I am passionate, driven about growing and expanding. That is what I want to do emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That's what I help people how to do. But that means that we step through that barrier. The general problem, sometimes you get judgment. We've all seen it. We've all probably done it in some way, shape, or form. When we start growing and expanding and becoming a better version of ourselves, people are like, why are you doing that? Let's say, for example, I'm not drinking this weekend. I'm not going to choose to drink. Oh, really? That's boring. That's this. Is it? You know what? I'm actually going to spend some time to make sure that my health and my emotions are in a good place. So I'm not going to go out again tonight. I want to spend some time doing something. Oh, God. Who do you think you are? Who are you? When we grow, sometimes, not all the time, this can happen. The expansion zone, the pitfall, is simply put, it requires effort that some/most, that's why I put both of those options, don't want to give. And, simply put, anyone who's gone through my program with me, they expand, they're in the expansion zone. But the truth is, you may have to do things that you currently don't do, which may feel different to begin with. Some people don't want to expand. That's cool. Who am I to tell you how to live your life? I'm just here to show you the options of what's possible. But none of these are always going to be the case. I mean, I'll be honest with you. This side is, and I think you already know that. These side here, the judgment and doing the effort isn't always going to be the case. But it does require a part of you to say, you know what, I'm willing to put in this work. I'm willing to grow. I'm willing to expand. I'm willing to put myself in a place to learn something new that I don't already do, but not only learn it, action it. And when I do that, that's where I'm going to break through. Any fear, by the way, any fear is simply because you're familiar and you've learned and you haven't actioned. That's all fear is. Because as soon as you action it, you get a result, so the fear goes. How many times have you had something in your life that you've been, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that, I'm not quite sure how this is going to go, I'm not quite sure the way that this is going to be. Oh no, what should I do? And then you go and do it and you go, I don't know why I was getting so fearful in the end. Because you broke the fear barrier, you went from learning, oh God, is this what I need to do? Is this what I need to do? To growing. In that moment, you eliminated the fear barrier. And so I'll come back to it. Why am I showing you these zones of how to access them specifically? Because you need to understand what zone you are in if you're going to be moving forwards. I have a fear barrier in front of me every single day in certain things. Why? Because no quicker than do I learn and I grow and I expand, that becomes familiar after a while. When you enter a new relationship, you enter the growth zone. Because, oh God, shan't I? This person's interested in me. I'm learning about them. They're learning about me. But yeah, we're going to get into a relationship together. You enter the growth zone, but after a day, a week, a month, a year, that growth zone isn't growing anymore. And we slip back into what becomes familiar. But people don't reset. People stay in the same place. That's why some people's relationship is boring. It's unfulfilling. It's life limiting. The same with your emotions. You know, as I say, people who have worked with me, but it won't just be people who have worked with me. Some of you are doing things that you wouldn't have dreamed of 6 months ago, but now it's just normal. Now it's just familiar. I hit my fear barriers very regularly, because I'm always growing and expanding, but very quickly that becomes the norm. So what we need to understand here is, in all of this, what is your only barrier to your success? This thing right here. Because right now, like I said to you maybe 5-10 minutes ago, you are learning. You're taking this in. Some of you are taking notes. You're nodding your head. God, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see how this happens. I can see what we do here. So this is the barrier to your success. This here. So what do we need to do? The only barrier to your success is eliminating the fear barrier. How do you eliminate any fear barrier? Well, the first thing is this. My little mate here, you don't look like this. Because if you talk to people about fear, if I asked you now, tell me, what does fearing look like? I'm just not sure if I can. Their state is, this is going on YouTube, so I need to keep my language clean. Rubbish. Their state is rubbish. It is disempowered, it is low energy, it is low vibrancy, it's fear. You know, when I talk about your body, your focus, and your words, we want to put ourselves in an empowered state where I start to focus on, right, this is what I want to do. I'm going to decide on a course of action that is true and right for me. The way that I'm now talking is with more vibrancy, more energy. My state is I'm starting to feel a bit stronger. You can even see with my hands here, I didn't even plan this, but the moment I start to uplift my state, I start to decide on what's right and what's true. And then in that moment, I don't overthink, I don't overanalyze, I take action in that exact moment. Because when I do that, like I said to you before, I decide, I commit, and I act in that moment. Where does decide, commit, and act live? Tell me through the screen. Decide, commit, and act. The growth zone. And in that moment, I eliminate any fear that sits in front of me. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's asking that person out on a date. I don't care if it's the public speaking event. I don't care if it's driving the car. I don't care if it's stepping outside the house. I don't care if it's playing football in front of 50,000 people, whatever it may be. If you are in a high empowered state, you know what's right and what's true at the level of your heart, not the feeble, fickle thoughts and feelings of your head. And then you, in that moment, you go, right, this is what I'm doing. Boom. You move into action. You will eliminate that fear barrier. Fear, remember this, fear is simply false expectation appearing real. That is all fear ever is. A false expectation appearing real barrier. And when that happens, we then often, this false expectation, I'm making it real, and I start overthinking and I move further away. And we end up like this dude over here who doesn't go anywhere near progress in their life, doesn't go anywhere near growing and expanding, never eliminates the fear barrier, never breaks through, never breaks out, never allows themselves to actually become something more. Action negates fear, but action without the state is simply, I'm going to do it, but I'm not going to feel good about doing it. It's never going to create a shift. This is why forms of exposure therapy are not optimal, because all we're teaching ourselves is to be fearful and to get the action done. But no, it follows this order. That's why the arrow's pointing down here. Create the empowered state. That's why I'm bringing more energy to you now in this training. Decide on the course of action that is true and is right. Then take action in that exact moment. That is how you grow. That is how you expand beyond your current identity. And then if you want, for long-term results, consistency in that area. Consistency. Because when you're consistent in the area of growth and expansion, the action on the learnings you have taken to enter growth, and then to cut off from all other eventualities to expand, you will never, ever be caged or limited emotionally. Ever. Anxiety, fear, worry, doubt, dread, overwhelm, whatever it may be, you won't live there. because you will have the exact remedy. You'll have the exact ingredients to know exactly what I need to do to break through these barriers in my life. Do I sometimes need to bring a higher level of me because some fears are bigger than others? Of course. Of course I do. I'm never caged by it though, because I know what I need to bring to be able to break through any barrier that's in front of me. Not that I'm gifted, not that I have any particular ability or skill that others don't have. I just practice it all the time, and I do this all the time. I'm consistent. That's why I create long-term results in certain areas. That's why anyone does in areas where they're quote unquote successful. I want you to be successful in your emotions. This is how we're going to do it. So I suppose this just leads us to one final part. If we know what we need to do, and we know that the only barrier to our success is that fear barrier there, and it's the inaction of learning. Familiarity zone, let's forget it. Forget it. We all want familiarity, but guess what? When you can find familiarity in growth and expansion, you've got the key to life there. So for long-term results, we want consistency. But here's the thing, the final question. What zone do you want to operate in? What zone do you truly want to operate in? Are you happy being familiar with everything, being in that comfort zone? I know we all want comfort. Of course we do. But can we find comfort in growth? It's an interesting way of talking about it. It's an interesting way of looking at it. When are you most fulfilled? When are you most happy? When you're progressing in a certain area of your life. When you feel like your relationship or your finances or your health or your kids' school reports are progressing, you're happy with them. Why? Because they're growing. They're expanding. That's where we feel like, nice. Familiarity is great for a short period of time because it gives us comfort, it gives us basic needs, it gives us safety for a certain element, but very quickly it becomes boring, unfulfilling, and life limiting. That's what we saw on that first slide. So what zone do you want to operate in? The final step is this. How are you going to operate in that zone? What are you going to do? What's the decision, the commitment, the action that you're going to take? What is it that you're going to put into place? How are you going to do it? What's the area of your life that you want to grow or expand, or whatever it is, whatever zone you want to operate in? What's the actionable step that you're going to do to make that real? How are you going to do it? Once you've done that, what do you need to do right now to make this a reality? See, right now is underlined. Why? Because I've kidded myself. I used to kid myself for long enough. Diet starts Monday. Yeah, what Monday's that then? Because diet never starts Monday. Let's be real. Diet starts right now, and I'm going to action something right now where I grow and expand and cut off from all ever eventualities. And guess what? I lose the weight. Diet starts Monday. It's like New Year's resolutions. They're words. They're words. That's why people usually quit them by the second or third Friday. That's why by the end of January, they're definitely gone. By February, they're a thing of the past. Anyone who stayed with them, they've grown and expanded and stayed consistent with these certain ways. Why? Because they've, as I go back, decided, committed and acted, and they've taken that example, and then probably, if they've really stayed consistent, they've cut off from all other eventualities. This is how you eliminate fear for good in your life. Eliminate fear for good. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't mean that you're not going to feel a little bit unsure or uncertain at times. No, it means it doesn't cage you. It doesn't limit your life. It doesn't have a hold on you that says, this is how you need to act, this is how you need to operate. Absolutely not. This is simply about you being in control in this way. And in this particular training here, that has apparently gone on slightly longer than I intended to, I want this to not only be a seedling of thought for you now. I don't just want this to be a nice learning for you. I want it to be actionable growth for you to be able to expand. How are you going to do that? Understand what's the zone you want to operate in. How much is it that you're actually willing to achieve whatever result it is that you want in your emotions, which is why I'm here, or in any other area? Then how am I going to do that? I don't need to know the whole path. I just need to take the first step. And then what do I need to do right now? Because the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So I think it's probably about time that we stop playing games with our fears and worries and doubts and dreads and anxieties and actually start doing things that are going to create an actionable shift. Because if you do that, life will change so much faster than what you think. That is what you see on my page on a consistent basis. That is how you see people action these things. Not because there's any special gift or skill. It's because they do exactly this, what you're seeing underneath my face right here. This is exactly what they do. We recognize where that fear barrier is, and then we grow and expand way beyond that. So then it becomes a thing of the past. This is where life is lived, baby. I hope this and I trust that this particular training has been very beneficial for you. If I can serve you, if I can assist you in breaking that fear barrier, I would love to. I've got some wonderful, wonderful things that are going to help you in that way. Many, many beautiful things that are coming your way this year. If you want to run some ideas past me, I would love to serve you in that way. But make sure this isn't just a nice learning for you. Let's make sure we start to put action in and certain things in place to break that fear barrier and move past this thing for good. Have a wonderful one, and I'll see you very, very soon. Take care.